Okay, I like how that magically the TV comes on. Good evening. We're about to begin our Oxnard City Council Community Services Committee. Welcome, everyone. We are meeting from 6 to 7:15, and I'm going to ask our city clerk to do roll call and posting of the agenda information.
Member Basua.
Here.
Member Madrigal.
Here.
Chair Ramirez.
I'm here. So I'm going to actually ask our city attorney to lead us in the pledge. He hasn't done that in a while. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda, and I hope everybody had a chance to review the minutes. And is there any corrections or changes? And if not, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. The next item is a report from the city attorney about the volunteer program update, the recommendation that the Community Services Committee receive a report on the City of Oxnard's volunteer and non-paid internship program and provide direction regarding volunteer services to the city. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Get my own lights here. So I've been working with staff in various departments that utilize volunteers on the overall issue of how to best utilize volunteers in the city, residents who want to donate their services essentially to assist with all kinds of things from beautification to helping staff events. And I've particularly been working with Adam Smith in the city manager's office, and he's done most of the work putting this program together tonight, so I'd like to thank him. And as you stated just now, the recommendation is to receive this report on what we've been working on and provide us with direction, feedback on this topic. So by way of background, volunteers are currently being utilized in several departments in the city and have been for a long time. In particular, recreation stands out. Lots of volunteers who serve in the various athletic leagues. There are special event volunteers, such as the Tamale Festival, and volunteers at the library, as well as in city attorney's office, we sometimes get asked to review internship agreements. There are students who, on a voluntary basis, in order to meet some qualifications for their classes, ask to serve as volunteers in places like the library. So there's a clear benefit to the city from these volunteer services. And what we've been looking at is how to enhance that benefit and also manage the program to address some of the issues that can arise from volunteer services. So coordination of services among departments is currently lacking. So departments are handling their volunteer needs on their own for the most part. They'll come to the city attorney's office if they need a waiver to be drafted or modified for a particular event or some other newer type of volunteer opportunity that comes around. But other than that, it's, to go back to a term that we haven't used in a while, it's sort of a siloed issue among the departments or within the departments. So each department manages its own volunteers, and staff's goal right now is to bring some uniformity to the administration of the volunteer services that are offered to the city. So we're looking to have a standardized volunteer and intern program in order to provide a management framework that better utilizes the volunteer services that are offered to us, and to, as I said before, address potential issues that can arise with volunteers. So within the agenda materials tonight, there is a standardized form. We've taken the existing waiver forms, volunteer waiver forms that departments have been using and are in the city attorney's office database, and we've expanded on that to kind of make it a single form that anybody seeking a volunteer opportunity with the city can utilize. They can check. It's a bit longer than the current forms that are being used, but it's meant to cover all of the bases that can come up here, including check boxes for particular interests in volunteer services, types of volunteer services that residents are willing to offer, as well as other things that you can see on that form. And that form would be typically submitted directly to the HR division that would then coordinate with the departments that would, that the resident filling out the form would have checked a box for they want to offer their services for that particular kind of need. Then HR would connect that person with that department. So staff currently maintains a list of volunteer opportunities, and that will, utilizing that list, will facilitate connecting the residents who want to contribute to the opportunities that the city has need for volunteers to work on. So this slide utilizes some language that, in my research on how other cities have been running their volunteer programs, this one actually showed up, this concept that volunteer programs aren't free, but the benefits outweigh the costs, typically. That's actually from a lengthy audit report from a few years ago that the city of San Jose conducted through its audit department. It's such a big city, they've got their own audit department that periodically looks at operations within that city. So in 2016, I believe it was, they did an audit of their volunteer services program, and it's a great resource as we look at what we want to do with volunteers in the city of Oxnard, how we want to maximize both the benefits to the city as well as maximize the experience for those residents who are offering up their services as volunteers. So just some examples of some of the more well-known volunteer programs, and we've got staff attending tonight who can talk more about the specifics of these, but the meetup cleanup events that occur periodically, the RSVP program is one that I've heard about for years. From when I was assistant city attorney and working with the Senior Services Commission, I would hear frequently about that program. Very successful, and Terrell can speak some more to that when I'm done talking at you, and I'm just about done. So the recommendation again is to provide us with direction, and certainly we've got the folks here to answer questions about how they're currently using volunteers, and if you have questions about the materials that have been included in the agenda packet, such as the form that's been revised, we're here to answer those questions.
Thank you. I do have one speaker. I'd like to hear from the speaker, public, before we have council comments. And if anyone else would like to, any other member of the public would like to speak, please fill out a card and you will be recognized. So Gabriel Turan?
Thank you, Chair Ramirez, members of the committee, and staff and the public. My name is Gabriel Turan. I'm the chair for the Fremont South Neighborhood Council. I'm also on the Parks and Rec and Community Services Commission. And I'd like to applaud and recognize city staff for putting the effort into this volunteer program. It's one way that we can, at least for the time being, look at really trying to make up for the decrease in service levels we had to experience, especially with the reduction in service levels from the city. And so looking at that, and especially looking at public works, there are plenty of people out there who are willing to pitch in on low-risk activities such as weeding or maintaining fence lines or taking care of things out at the parks that have really had to go onto a reduced maintenance cycle. And so I really am looking forward to how this will develop and how it will be implemented. And I know that through recreation, there is a process in doing live scan through the police department where anyone who's going to be in contact with minors does need to be fingerprinted. And I'm wondering if part of this process for anyone who's interested in doing that, maybe as an umbrella type of function through the city, if they just go ahead and get live scanned, and then once they're cleared, they're kind of known on the list as a cleared volunteer for any type of activity that could be done where they might come in contact with children. And that could range from things directly with rec or as much as the Tamale Festival, and it's another way to have just a pool of volunteers who are available at any time. And something like that, I wouldn't mind doing that myself, even if there was a share of cost. I work for school districts. I know that I'll pass those live scans if the city needed me to do it, and I'd love to be on a list to be accessible as needed if there was a call for volunteers for something that was coming up. Lastly, I looked over the application, and it's pretty comprehensive, and I think it's going to be a good start. And I'm wondering if eventually this would become maybe an online form or a virtual process where someone could fill it out through the city's website, and then it would automatically notify the city attorney's office and then the respective department and department head that they have an interested volunteer in that area. And maybe that might help streamline things as well in the future. And it'd all be available online for city staff to access at any time. They'd know within their department, how many volunteers they've had or people interested in volunteer opportunities. And so I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this, and I look forward to seeing where this goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turan, and thank you for your service to the city. I don't see any other speakers, so let's go to council comments. Councilman Madrigal.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I know that volunteer work and volunteers, there's many volunteers in the city who want to give up their time to help out the city. However, I've always heard a mixed bag when it comes to results. I've heard that I wasn't notified or there was a change in administration or a change in leadership, and they said my services were no longer needed. Or I know that if you go to a particular park, you're allowed to, or residents in that area are allowed to, do a little bit more than in any other park in the city. I know recently we lost the Summer at the City program, which was an internship of high school kids. And I know that the city of Port Hueneme and the city of Camarillo kind of picked up for some of the high schools. However, that only really helped out, Hueneme High School and Rio Mesa and Camarillo. Where the program started at Oxnard High School, those kids were left out in the cold. And I do know that they actually reached out again, so I don't know what that answer would be as far as this summer goes. But I know that the process that the city's worked with, and I know This isn't just necessarily for Oxnard, but in a lot of cities, there's the so-called red tape. And I know many residents who do a lot of volunteer services, are asked at times, do you have the city's permission? And they always say no. They say that, it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Because as soon as they tell anyone in the city that they're doing something, they get shut down, and they get shut down fast. So I know that this will hopefully help out a little bit, but I know at the core of the issue, you're still going to have a lot of the same issues that we have right now. This might streamline it, but realistically, the people who are heavily pushing to do more services are still not necessarily going to be pleased, and they're not necessarily going to be able to get what they would hope that they would get from this, in my point of view.
Okay, Councilwoman?
Thank you. Thank you for all the hard work that went into putting this together. So I do have a few questions, and if I understood the presentation correctly, so moving forward, all the volunteer forms are going to go to HR, and they're going to be centralized within that department?
So I believe that's the plan. Now, that may be a little different for recreation, since they've got such a structured use and longstanding use of volunteers. We'll have to figure out if it makes sense to keep, to remove that to HR as sort of the centralized submittal point, or somehow there has to be a connection to whether it's deposited in recreation, let's say, the form. There has to be some centralized tracking of which volunteers are on file and working on projects for which department.
Okay.
So, Committee Member Basua, right now the process that we have in recreation, especially because a lot of our volunteers work with youth, they may submit their form in recreation, but they're processed through HR. So HR is going to keep a list and has a list of all of our volunteers who volunteer in the different programs. And they keep all the backgrounds. And if somebody over the years, if they're not eligible to volunteer anymore, we hear about it right away through HR.
Okay, thank you. And I do have another question, and I think this is great, but, and I'll use example my District 5. I know there are numerous people that have asked me, can we clean the medians? And obviously it's dangerous to be out there in the medians. That is not something that this program will allow, would it?
So there's a few concerns, not just the risk to the volunteers in a hazardous area providing work, but also potential risk to others if work is not done correctly in a public right-of-way. There is also the matter of, if that were to be permitted at all, it would require a high degree of management and training of people to do it, to the point where you run into other issues relating more to the employment side, the labor law side of things. So that is currently not something that's on our short list of priorities for setting up a volunteer program for. I think the focus is more on, as was stated before, low-risk areas in parks and things like that, and those opportunities are, they should be plentiful enough, but medians, and maybe Mr. Yanez can talk further about his views on that, but I believe the focus is more on the park side.
Good evening, Chair, committee members. Brian Yanez, Assistant Public Works Director. Yeah, we've not been allowing folks to be in our medians, but we have allowed folks to be in the parkways. which gives them a sidewalk and an area of safety. We most recently had one of our pothole gentlemen get struck by a vehicle, and he had his vehicle lights on, yellow vest, orange vest, and this was about a month ago. So it's just a huge liability for staff to be out in the median. Like Steve said, it would take extra precautions for us to allow this in the medians, but we're always willing to look at the parkways and other safe locations like in our parks. We also do have coming up to the committee is our Adopt a Park program. So it's been vetted through the Parks Commission 1 month ago, and we plan on bringing this to the committee and then finally to the council, which allows individuals to adopt a park, groups, nonprofits, religious groups, whoever, you name it, we want them. It also allows for commercial businesses to either adopt the location and have monetary donations come our way. So it's an exciting program coming to the committee, hopefully in the next couple months.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is great, and I know that when attorneys look at things, they're always thinking about all of the worst case scenario. And I kind of see that thinking here. And I really wanted this to come to us so that people could volunteer. I think a lot of people in our community are frustrated because they have skills, they have energy, and they want to do things. And then we ask them to sign a 10-page form. So I see that, I know we have to do it. It is 10, I counted 10 pages. And it does ask for, people, do people have to sign the thing about photographs?
We actually...
Can we skip that part if we want to, exit out? If people don't want to be photographed all grubby and full of weeds in their hair?
So the form goes through page 7 through a little bit onto page 10 of the agenda materials.
Okay, I miscounted. All right, take it back. Take it back. Okay.
I didn't think I got that lawyerly with the form.
Well, I do think that, let's see how it goes, because I think it's really good to do this. We want to do it. But I just see a few little obstacles there in terms of confronting this form. Will this be available in Spanish? Espero que sí. Ojalá que sí.
Certainly.
Okay. And the other is, just a kind of a question I have. A lot of times I have students, whether in high school on up to master's programs, who want to shadow me. I don't really consider it something that I certainly can't pay for it. The city can't pay for it. But that is in a whole different category, right?
Probably, if they're here just to observe and learn rather than providing services, that would probably be in a different category, like you said. And in fact, I know we've had the kind of job shadow program in recent years. Mm-hmm. I don't believe it's been subject to the same kind of administration that we're talking about. But I didn't look at that specifically in preparation for tonight.
Okay, very good. So just a thought there. Well, I think this is a very good start. Let's see how it goes. When might does this have to go to council? This particular
So
form?
not for this. However, I did want to kind of acknowledge the reality and plant the seed that the more involved the city's volunteer program becomes, the more it becomes a budget issue. And most cities that I looked at that have that you can find have a rather robust program that you can find through their city websites that shows a high degree of management of that system. And I'm assuming for some of these cities it has a lot more than just one volunteer coordinator position specified to run the program. And to my knowledge, we don't have a particular volunteer program manager position in the city currently. So we're pulling it together with what's currently happening and trying to get to more standardization. And if that evolves into something bigger that requires a budgeted position, then that's something that has to be addressed through the budget process.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to finish my comments by saying that the city, what I would like the public to recognize is that while there are a lot of needs in the city and people are willing to do things, the city also needs to look out for protecting the treasury of the city if people were to become volunteers and get injured or do something that causes the city to have to be liable for something. I think that's what the concern is here. That's why it's taking so long. So I look forward to seeing this go further and people being able to really help their city, our city, make things better, including the weeding and all of the other things, the festival help and that kind of thing. I think it's really good. Do my colleagues have further comments? Oscar? Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I hope you've gotten enough feedback there. So, anything else? No? Okay. Well, thank you. That concludes that item. The next item is items for future agenda matters.
No.
Do you have anything, Mr. Madrigal?
No.
Ms. Pasua? Well, the two things that I'd like to ask is I was earlier at the Public Safety Committee, and we had a great presentation by our Emergency Services Department and County Emergency Services. And I think, and it's going to, the whole presentation is going to go to the full council, but I'd like us to kind of stay on top of that one. And in terms of what the public needs to do to be ready, because we can't be sure that we'll have services from the city or the county for people if we have an earthquake and that kind of thing. Behooves us to be ready in our homes to the extent we can. And the other is a discussion of the census. Census is starting pretty soon and getting a full count, and our city is one of those areas, and the county in general is one of those cities that's considered a hard to count area. And if we don't get a good count, a full count, the city will lose out on financial opportunities to take care of our city and our people. So I would like to see if we could get a report on that the next time. I think that falls in our purview. So anything, council members? Okay, with that, we are going to be adjourned. Thank you very much.